Today on Locked On Penguins, we look back at the season that was for defenseman Erik Karlsson. Just as we thought, Mike Sullivan is going to the New York Rangers, and a Penguins legend has officially called it a career. All of that coming up right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Friday edition of Locked On Penguins. I am back and I am one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at Synonym for Wet. Joined once again and as always by my co-host, the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's Twitter a follow at LO_Penguins. And of course, as always, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the Roku channel and YouTube. If you're following us on YouTube, go ahead and hit that notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Like I said, I'm back. As you can see, the lights are back on at my home. I was in the dark for well over 24 hours and unable to record, so that was, as one in the business would call, not very fun. So shout out to Hunter, shout out to Jesse Marshall for picking up the reins, because I was stuck in the dark. So happy to be back on the show, but let's get right into it, Hunter. We might as well end the week talking about one of the most polarizing characters on the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that is defenseman Erik Karlsson. Not a terrible year, not a great year either. You look at the top line statistics, plays all 82 games, scores 11 goals, adds 42 assists for 53 points. He also hit the 200 goal mark this season. Congratulations to Karlsson for that, continuing to cement his legacy as one of the best offensive defensemen in the modern era. But let's start here with this. Rather than go right into the negative, because we've talked about the negative on this show throughout the last couple of years. It's constantly a topic of discussion around this team, considering where they are and where they want to go. But he really increased his stock during the Four Nations face-off with Team Sweden. And I look at it in two ways. One, it shows that he still has it. It might not be what it was 5-10 years ago, but he still has a lot of talent. He is still a very talented defenseman. Then there's the flip side of it, which I have definitely mentioned on this show before, is if you have Erik Karlsson, I often refer to him as a golden retriever. You need a big open field for him to run in, but you also need the owner with the leash right next to him as well. And going all the way back, we're not going to relitigate the trade, but they got the first part correct. They got Erik Karlsson in the offseason after missing the playoffs by a single point. The problem is they never really got a good, steady defenseman to go with him in these last couple of years. So that's kind of aided in it being disappointing. Now, that doesn't mean he's free of blame. That doesn't mean he hasn't disappointed, because he certainly has. But when I look at the totality of Erik Karlsson's tenure thus far as a Penguin, I look at it as they got a guy that they needed, but they didn't get what they needed to put around him.
I understand what you're saying, because when you look at the Four Nations face-off, him and Matthias Ekholm were really good together as a pair, and that's exactly the type of partner that he needs. Someone who is really good in his own zone, also a physical defenseman that can punish any puck carrier that comes in. He can kind of babysit, I guess could be the word, Karlsson, while he kind of does his thing in the offensive zone. You saw Gustav Forsling also do the same thing during the Four Nations faceoff. Like those two, they let Karlsson cook and do his thing in the offensive zone while they kind of peeled back and they handled some of the responsibilities in their own zone. Because, Ekholm and Forsling, they're two of the best defensive defensemen in the league. And you can make an argument that Forsling is the best defensive defenseman in the league. It's him and Jacob Slavin for me in terms of the best, pure defensive defensemen in the league. Like they are both tremendous. But for a time, him and Marcus Karlsson, that is, him and Pettersson, they formed a pretty decent pairing at times. Like you look at the numbers even for this season, they played 47 games together, almost 500 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. When they were on the ice together as a pair, Penguins had 52% of the shot attempts. They also had 55% of the expected goals, 51% of the scoring chances, and 57% of the high danger chances. But when you take someone like Pettersson away from Karlsson, so you have 82 games, almost 1,100 minutes at 5-on-5 ice time, the shot attempt numbers go down to 50%, which is fine, but the expected goals goes down from 55 to 47. Scoring chances goes down from 51 to 49. And then the high danger chances goes down from 57% all the way down to 44%. Like they didn't have anyone else that could play with him once Pettersson got traded. And at least last year, I thought Pettersson was really good with Karlsson. This year, Pettersson's game went down a little bit, but he was still able to at least, play fine in his own zone. The Penguins got a really good return for him right before the trade deadline. But after that, they really had no one that could play with him. So on the off chance that they decide to keep Karlsson going into next season, because I think it's likely that he probably gets moved, but in the off chance that they don't move him, they will have to go out there, and I was talking about this with Kelsey on her show yesterday, Kelsey Cermax of the Hockey News. They will have to go out there, no matter what, but especially in this case, and get a bona fide top 4 defenseman that can play with Karlsson. Someone like that is probably going to have to be a stay-at-home defensive defenseman who can still at least put up a little bit of offense, but that's what they're going to have to go after if they do keep Karlsson. Again, they'll probably have to do that regardless. They have to get at least one, if not two, defenders to play on the left side, because the left side right now, outside of Owen Pickering, not very good. But again, they don't have a player that can play with Karlsson right now on this team. Outside of that, when you look away from the numbers with his Pettersson and otherwise, I will say this for Karlsson, man. He had 33 points at 5-on-5 this year. That is tied for 5th in the league with Evan Bouchard, Bowen Byram, Adam Fox, Lane Hudson, Tomas Chabot, etc. Only Quinn Hughes, Rasmus Dahlin, Cale Makar, and Zach Werenski had more points at 5-on-5 this season among defensemen. Karlsson can still do that much. Yes, he can't defend it anymore. He was in the 1 percentile at 5-on-5 even strength defense when they traded for him. You were never trading for his defensive capability. And while I would say he was inconsistent during his time here, I still do think from at least some fans, he got a little too much flack. So with that, I'll give him an average grade for the season. I'll give him a C. I'm not going to give him a D or an F. I don't really think that's fair. Again, he was top 10 in 5-on-5 points among defensemen this year. He had some really good games while also having some games where he wasn't that good. Again, that's why I kind of graded out to average. Had some really good, had some really bad. You mix all those together, you get an average grade. And I'll say one more thing, man. They trade him, and that's likely. I still need to know where the offense is coming from the back end. And I think a lot of other fans need to ask themselves that question too.
Absolutely. I'm right there on the letter grade with you, somewhere between a C and a B minus. I think you look at, like you said, you brought up the 5-on-5 numbers. You finished top 10 in 5-on-5 scoring as a defenseman. It's hard to say that you had a truly bad year, because that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because you're probably pretty good. There's kind of a connective tissue here as well that I kind of want to dive into really quickly with Erik Karlsson, and it has to do with the other big name defenseman on the Penguins, and that's Chris Letang. If you remember, especially early on in Chris Letang's tenure and even into his prime, when he would make a mistake, he wouldn't just make a mistake. He would make an insane mistake that it was impossible for you to not notice it. The same thing kind of happens with Erik Karlsson. When he messes up, boy, oh boy, he goes for broke. He completely screws the pooch, But at the end of the day, both players have something in common now. And that's, you can tell that they are starting to slow down. They are starting to become not quite a shell of themselves because they still have plenty of talent, but they're trying to do things that they could do 5-10 years ago. And they just don't have the talent to do those things anymore. You saw it a lot with Erik Karlsson's game this year. We lamented it every time it happened. He would go for a pinch and he would hesitate, whether that's a lack of foot speed, whatever else. The thing I continually said about Karlsson throughout this season was, if you're going to do it, do it. No half measures, because if you're going to do it and it doesn't work, it's going to lead to a scoring chance against regardless. So go for broke. Don't go halfway down the wall and then decide to pull back and put everybody else in a bad position. Because if you go all the way out, good chance some of the forwards are going to notice the pinch and they're going to at least attempt to cover you. But if you're halfway down the wall in that pinch attempt, they're probably not going to come back, and it's going to make the scoring chance against even worse. So if nothing else, very similar to a couple other players we've talked about throughout the season, it just needs to be more decisive for Erik Karlsson, which is something I never thought I would say about him. But say they hold on to him, and let's even put aside how much work that Kyle Dubas is going to have to do on the defense. They do hold on to him next season. Whoever's behind the bench, just look at Karlsson and go be you. Do what you do. We'll figure everything else out aside from that.
I do think a new system, if he does not get traded, I do think a new system with a new coach in place could be beneficial if that system also suits his game. Because I think a little bit part of the reason of his struggles, and again, we'll get to Mike Sullivan in a couple of seconds, was that maybe he didn't really fit the way Mike Sullivan wanted to play with this team. So maybe a new coach coming in here could be beneficial to him if Kyle Dubas doesn't move him.
Right. And I think that's the best place to leave it. If they hold on to him, I do think he would benefit from a new system and a new coach, just because you can maybe find a way to better utilize him if they hold on to him. But we will see what happens with him this summer. It does appear that there is interest in him around the league. We'll see how Kyle Dubas decides to go about that, because if you do look at some of his comments about Erik Karlsson at the end of the season, while it doesn't seem like he's slamming the door shut on a trade, he does seem to admire him quite a bit and wants him to be part of the solution. So if you don't get the right deal, given where this team is, I don't think there's much harm in holding on to him. Just see what happens, see what you got, because you're not gunning for a Stanley Cup, and you don't need to suddenly free up all that cap space to get somebody else or a couple other players. But we'll leave it there for the Erik Karlsson season in review. Both of us kind of give him an average grade, C, B-, something in that range. We'll keep an eye on everything around Erik Karlsson throughout this offseason, but that's going to do it for our opening segment. When we come back, just like we thought at the start of the week, Mike Sullivan will be the next head coach of the New York Rangers. We'll get into that when we come back right after this. But first, we got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is the Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with the Fire TV Stick 4K. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed. As easily as you stream your favorite shows, it's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. I do have a Fire TV down in my living room, and it absolutely is my entertainment hub. I've got all of my cable subscriptions on there, all my streaming services. It's all that convenience all in one place. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including the Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cubed 3rd Gen. All right, we're back here on the Friday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp, running alongside the one and only Hunter Hodes, as always. And I mean, sometimes the obvious things, well, they are just that. Very obvious. Made official this morning after some rumors on Thursday evening that Mike Sullivan is officially the newest head coach of Metropolitan Division rival, the New York Rangers. It was extremely obvious this was who Chris Drury wanted. He's got experience with Mike Sullivan in the last 2 years that Chris Drury was the captain of the New York Rangers. Mike Sullivan was one of the assistant coaches, and Drury pretty much came out and said as soon as Sullivan became available, their coaching search was one of one, and it was Mike Sullivan. Let's start here, Hunter. This is a great hire for the New York Rangers. However, it has to be just that, because I look at this Rangers team and I have two thoughts about it, whether it's the Rangers as a whole or Mike Sullivan as the head coach. The Rangers as a whole, still a pretty good team. You look at that roster, a lot of talent. They have some holes to fill, but the foundation is there for this to be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. And then when you relate it to Mike Sullivan, I'm going to steal a little bit from our good friend Josh Yohe. What is the one thing that has consistently failed Mike Sullivan over the last 5 years? Goaltending. Now he's got arguably the best goalie in the world, at the very least a top 3 goaltender in Igor Shesterkin. So this is really not so much for Mike Sullivan because he just got here, but for everybody else on the Rangers, it's put up or shut up time for them.
Well, especially for the GM too, right? I mean, this is what, Pat, the third coach he's hired as GM, Chris Drury. He's hired Gerard Gallant. He's hired Peter Laviolette, and now he's hired Mike Sullivan. He's out of excuses at this rate. He doesn't get this one right, he's going to be fired pretty quickly. I know he just got extended by James Dolan for whatever reason. Don't know why he decided to extend Chris Drury after the season that the Rangers just had, but it's put up or shut up time for a lot of these Rangers players. I think Sullivan can guide the Rangers to the playoffs. I don't think you're going to win a Stanley Cup with this core. Could be dead wrong on that, but I feel like the core right now has kind of passed its peak like dates of being a contender. So I don't see it as of right now, unless they make a whole bunch of changes this offseason. I'm sure there's going to be changes. They have less than 10 million of salary cap space right now, and they have some pretty big RFAs to sign. But still, I think Mike Sullivan can do wonders with the way they play in their own zone, especially with the way the Penguins defended 2016, 2017, heck, even to a little bit of a lesser extent, 2018, the Rangers were horrendous defensively last year, kind of rivaled the Penguins with how poor they were in their own zone. I think he can help in that regard. He obviously will have Igor Shesterkin. This is the best goalie he's ever had as a head coach. I mean, Shesterkin's one of the 3 best goaltenders on the planet, in my opinion, so that's big. But again, with the Rangers, I understand that this is a win-now situation. I understand he's getting a lot of money and a lot of term. I mean, this is probably going to be one of the richest contracts a head coach has ever gotten in NHL history. I know I was listening to 32 Thoughts this morning, and Friedman said he wasn't sure if it's going to break the Babcock one with 8 years, but it may break the record for the biggest AAV, average annual value. Like I saw a couple of reports that it could be 7 million per year. We'll have to see when the official number comes out. If so, that's again, Pat, pretty nice payday for one of the top coaches in the league. But if they don't get this right over the next couple of years, I know he signed a 5-year contract. He's probably going to be out of there pretty quickly. Peter Laviolette lasted 2 seasons, took them to the Eastern Conference Final. They missed the playoffs this year. He's out. They're going to have a very short fuse. Even though this is Mike Sullivan, they will have a very short fuse if this does not go according to plan, because that's how the Rangers are. And they have wanted him for the last few years. It's funny. Before you joined the show, it was actually almost 2 years to the day. I believe it was May 10th, 2023. The Rangers were talking about maybe trying to poach Sullivan away from the Penguins. They're like, oh, we're hoping that they fire him and stuff. And I put an episode. It was 25 minutes long. And the title was, or the caption with the thumbnail was, "Dream on, Rangers fans." And the title was, "No, Mike Sullivan is not going to the New York Rangers." Well, 2 years later, they dreamed and well, they got it this time 2 years later. But I just wanted to mention that because I found it funny. I think I saw a couple Rangers fans found that one this morning.
Of course they did.
Fair play. I get it. Fair play. 2 years later, didn't think it was going to happen, but you know what? That's a fair play. I appreciate it. But there's no more excuses for the GM there. We don't want to turn this into a Rangers episode here just because we're not the host of Locked On Rangers. John Chick does a really good job with them. I'm sure we'll do a crossover with him at some point. But, I'm happy for Mike. It took him not even a full week to get a job as we both expected, but he has his work cut out for him. That's for sure.
I will say this. You hinted at something I was going to bring up, which again shows we've been doing this show together long enough that we are very much on similar wavelengths. The way you describe the Rangers kind of sort of describes the way the Penguins were in 2015, 2016 when Sullivan came on. Obviously different situations. Penguins have maybe the best player, definitely at the time, the best player in the world on their roster.
The age gaps were a bit different. Like the Rangers core right now is a bit older. Well, outside of Fox, he's still a lot younger. But, Zibanejad's older now. Kreider's older. Trocheck's older. I just don't really see it with that core. I feel like with their situation, they might have to move out one of those guys to bring in some better, younger talent if they really want to take a swing at this. But I'll say this. They've picked a direction. They're not trying to rebuild / retool next year. They are all in to win.
But to continue what I was saying, you kind of compare the two of when Sullivan comes in for the Penguins to now when he's coming in with the Rangers. And again, we're not going to turn this too much into a Rangers pod. Like you said, we love John, does a great job on Locked On Rangers, but they've got another coach in because you remember the Penguins go from Bilesma to Johnston, then to Sullivan. Bilesma's system, he's a little too player friendly. It's kind of wearing out his welcome. They're kind of directionless. They go get Mike Johnston. He wants to be a little more structured. He wants to be a little bit more defensive minded. The Rangers go from Gerard Gallant, who everybody says, hey, he's a little too buddy-buddy with the players, a little too loose. They go to Peter Laviolette. We know how Laviolette is, defensive minded, kind of a crack the whip kind of coach. And now you find that middle ground for a team that's been kind of looking for a direction. And Mike Sullivan, who again hits that middle ground, he's not going to open it up and say, forget defense, go play fast, do whatever you want. But he's also not going to come in there and go, don't you dare make defensive mistakes because we have to defend. He is going to put them in a direction where he's the guy in charge, but he's not your best friend. He's also not going to crack the whip every time you make a mistake. And he's going to let the top players be the top players. He's not going to have, if he's still on the roster, Artemi Panarin out there blocking shots and turning into a two-way player. He's going to tell Artemi Panarin, go out there and score because that's what you do. And you mix some of those things with a pretty good goaltender in Igor Shesterkin. There's a lot of similarities there. Again, like you said, age difference is there. Age difference is a bit bigger, but it's a core that has the talent, should be doing better. And you finally, hopefully found a guy who can put all that together and go on a run. Now, they're going to be in a very difficult Eastern Conference, especially at the top of the table. You look back at when the Penguins brought in Sullivan, wasn't as jam-packed at the top. You had 2 or 3, maybe 4 teams. You didn't have such a stacked Atlantic Division at the time. That was kind of in transition. But at the end of the day, I do think there are a lot of similarities, and this does feel like a very good opportunity for Mike Sullivan to add to what is pretty much already a Hall of Fame resume.
I wish him well, just not against the Penguins. Sorry. That's how I feel. And he's going to get a great ovation when he comes back to Pittsburgh for the first time. Obviously, the next season schedule probably going to come out, if I had to guess, June, July, somewhere in that vicinity. We'll have to obviously circle the games when he'll be back in Pittsburgh. It's going to be at least once, if not twice, depending on how many times they play the Rangers next season, whether it's 3 or 4. Right now, again, still think the Rangers, they could be a playoff team, maybe win a round, if not 2, but I still would not take them to beat the Panthers or a couple other teams in the conference right now. But hey, I think we've talked about Mike Sullivan and the Rangers enough during this episode.
We sure have. And like you said, that first meeting back, big ovation. But once the puck drops, sorry, Mike, you're the enemy now. That is going to do it for our middle segment. When we come back, speaking of former Penguins, legends, last night, the career of goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury officially has come to an end. We will talk about one of, if not the best goaltender in Penguins history and take a trip down memory lane when we come back. But before we do that, we've got to tell you about today's last sponsor, and that is Gametime. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you have never been to a Stanley Cup playoff game live and in person, it is truly unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's completely next level. And thanks to Gametime, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever before. Gametime is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as the puck drop gets closer. With last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. I'm a huge fan of that, the last-minute deals. I used Gametime this season for Penguins games, saved a boatload of money waiting until the day of to get those last-minute tickets. Saved me a bunch of money. Cannot recommend that enough, especially the all-in pricing, because we all hate those surprise fees at checkout. All-in pricing gives you your total up front, so you're not hit with any of those annoying last-minute fees. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Friday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And what a career for the surefire first ballot Hall of Fame goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury. The Minnesota Wild were eliminated by the Vegas Golden Knights, and that means the final season of Marc-Andre Fleury has come to an end. We all know how the saga went with Marc-Andre Fleury here in Pittsburgh. He was exposed in the 2017 expansion draft taken by the Vegas Golden Knights, spent a couple seasons with Vegas, had a small stop in Chicago, and then he was off to Minnesota where his career comes to an end. But there's no two ways about it. He is the best goalie in Penguins history for my money. They do not win the 2017 Stanley Cup without Marc-Andre Fleury stepping in the first two rounds, poetically eliminating the Washington Capitals once again. He was extremely good in the 2009 Stanley Cup run. We will always and forever remember the Secret Service save in Game 7 against the Detroit Red Wings to seal the victory. And it gets lost a little bit, in my opinion, to history because they ultimately did not win the Stanley Cup, but they made their run to the 2008 Stanley Cup final. And Marc-Andre Fleury in that playoff was sublime. I maintain that if they would have pushed the 2008 finals to Game 7, there would have been a very real case for Marc-Andre Fleury to get the Conn Smythe Trophy, even if they didn't win, because he was that good. I would make the argument in that final, without him, they probably get swept by Detroit.
Some people forget that, man. Like 2009, yes, he was great. 2017 for the first two rounds, he was great. He hands it off to Murray. The rest is history. They win back-to-back cups. But Pat, he was better in 08 than he was in 09. Like, yeah, we know the Penguins were a juggernaut in the East during the playoffs that year. They mowed right through the East. It just stunk that they ran into one of the best teams I have ever seen in my life in the 2008 Red Wings. That team was stacked from top to bottom. They had a great coaching staff behind the bench. That team was unbelievable with the amount of talent that they had. And I'll still say this, my friend, it is a miracle that the Penguins even got to 6 games against the Red Wings with a chance to get it to 7. I still, when I load up highlights of that series and it gets to the Hossa chance, I still feel like one of those times, Pat, that puck's going to go in the net at the buzzer and it's going to go to overtime. And it makes me sad every time that obviously they lose in that situation and the Red Wings raise the cup at Mellon Arena. But Fleury was so good throughout that run. He gave them chance after chance to get back in the series against the Red Wings. Obviously, the game 5 was insane. Game 6, Penguins did as well as they could have. But again, that Red Wings team was a machine. I'll always have the Lidstrom save forever etched in my memory. The 2 big saves on Ovechkin, one in 2017, and then the one also, Pat, in 2009, really early in game 7. Just 2, again, outstanding saves. And you can argue either one, him or Tom Barrasso, as the best goaltender in franchise history. They were both so good for this team. And I know Fleury's been gone a while, but I do think whenever the Penguins want to do something, whether it's a ring of honor, he should 100% be in that jersey retirement. We've had our takes on that. I'm a bit more reserved with who they retire. I think the big 3 should 100% go up there. Marc-Andre Fleury, while I would understand why they would do it, I personally would not retire his number. That's just, again, my opinion. Other people can disagree, and you know what? That's totally fine. I totally get the reasoning why people would want that. But I wish him all the best in retirement. Also, Pat, we've gotten some comments about this, like, oh, he could be the next goalie coach. Let's give the guy a little bit of time to breathe here. It would be cool. Don't get me wrong. It would be really cool if he got to work for the Penguins organization, though I do think the Wild will maybe try to get him to stay on as an advisor or something like that. But it still would be cool if he got to work for the Penguins organization at some point. But no matter what, he is going to get honored by the Penguins, whether it's a jersey retirement or whether it's some sort of ring of honor. At the very least, my friend, he should be in a ring of honor for everything he did for the Penguins. And I wish him the very best in retirement. What a career. First ballot Hall of Famer. One more thing, though. Can we leave the Fleury-Murray debates in 2018, man? Like, we really do not need to be doing this anymore. It is so annoying. It's 7 years ago. We can praise Marc-Andre Fleury for everything he did as a Penguin without bringing that up. Just drop it, please.
It doesn't have, we don't have to relitigate it every single time you bring up Marc-Andre Fleury. Last thing I'll say about Marc-Andre Fleury, and it's going to start off sounding like a cliche, but he's everything you'd want in a professional athlete, simply for the fact that he knew he had the greatest job in the world. Nobody, and I mean nobody, had more fun being an NHL goalie than Marc-Andre Fleury. I always think back to HBO 24/7 Road to the Winter Classic when they had their first practice at Heinz Field ahead of the game, and they do their shootout contest, and 99 out of 100 goalies in that net would be locked in, intense, not giving up a goal. What's Marc-Andre Fleury doing? Smiling, laughing, talking smack on everybody who comes down on him, and just having an absolute blast while doing it. Truly one of the greats, and all the best in retirement to Marc-Andre Fleury. Can't wait to see what the Penguins do to honor number 29. But that is going to do it for the Friday edition of Locked On Penguins. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Hunter's got his pups with him, so we definitely got to get rolling here. But we will be back with a brand new episode on Monday to get you ready for the NHL Draft Lottery. That's right, folks. It's going to be here before you know it. We'll talk about that, do some more season in reviews, and go over any news that may break over the weekend. But for now, for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We will be back on Monday.